Should we support, diminish, or abolish ICE? Let's consider. Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. Should a country enforce its immigration laws? On everybody? On only hard criminals? Or not at all? This is one of the most politically charged questions in the United States right now. And it's also one of the least philosophically examined. Everybody has a position, but few people have well thought out arguments. In this video, I'm going to look at three positions. First, that we should not enforce our immigration laws at all. Second, that we should selectively enforce our immigration laws. And third, we should completely enforce our immigration laws. I'm going to give you the strongest arguments for all three of those positions and the responses to those arguments. But you should know this is not a policy video. This is a philosophy video. What I'm going to do is look at these different positions and the strength of them. I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm going to provide you the reasons that people have for each position and then let you think for yourself. Before we do so, I want to disambiguate two questions. The first question is, should we have immigration laws at all? Should people be able to immigrate freely no matter what? The second question is, given the fact that we do have immigration laws, should we enforce them? In this video, I'm actually going to focus on the latter question. Although you'll see there is some overlap between the two questions because one of the arguments that we shouldn't enforce them is that we shouldn't have any laws at all. So although we will see some arguments to that effect, just know that this is not an evaluation of whether we should have borders at all. Perhaps if you like this video, I'll go ahead and do a video on that too. Okay, position one, we should have no enforcement of immigration laws at all. In the United States, this is the position that we should abolish agencies like ICE. People should be free to cross our borders without fear of deportation. The first argument for this position is the freedom of movement argument. This says that human beings have the natural right to move freely wherever they want. Borders are just artificial constructions that impinge on human liberty. And just like you have the right to move from Texas to California without anybody's permission, you should have the right to move from Mexico to California without anybody's permission. This argument draws on John Locke, who said, in the state of nature, there are no borders. Borders are drawn by the government. The government exists to protect rights. The government does not exist to create arbitrary barriers to human freedom. So that's our first argument. The response here looks like this. First, the analogy between moving from Texas to California and moving from Mexico to California breaks down. In the former case, you're moving within a single political community. It shares a common legal system, a common tax base, and a common set of democratic institutions. And whatever it requires for you to be a part of that, whether you need to be born into it or consent to it, you've got that between Texas and California. International movement is different. You're entering into a political community and you haven't consented to everything and they haven't consented to you. The existing members built the institutions and they've made commitments that your entry might affect. So the right to move wherever you want to within one political community doesn't automatically generate the right to move between political communities. Argument two, the humanitarian case. Immigration enforcement causes suffering, family separations, detention in inhumane conditions, and deportation to dangerous countries. There are a lot of undocumented people that moved from their home country when they were just babies and have no connection whatsoever back to their home country. So the moral cost of enforcing these laws doesn't outweigh the benefits. In response, you should first acknowledge the suffering. Enforcement of these laws absolutely does cause some suffering. But then again, many just actions cause suffering too. When you enforce any criminal law, it causes suffering to the criminal and to the criminal's family. And if you believe that collecting taxes is just, well, that's something that causes suffering too. So the question isn't whether enforcement on these laws causes pain. The question is, should we enforce these laws? Is it just to do so? Does it serve the public interest? Considerations like that. Argument three, the economic case. The case here is that immigrants, especially undocumented ones, contribute immensely to the economy. They work jobs that natural-born citizens won't take. This argument oftentimes is given by people asking questions like, who's going to pick your strawberries if we deport all the undocumented workers? There are a couple of responses to this argument. The first is the economic benefit here is due to unjust pay for undocumented workers. If these people were legal citizens, then we would have to pay them a lot more. But a second is that the economic benefits are not evenly distributed. Who benefits here from cheap labor? Employers and consumers. The people that don't benefit are the low-wage native-born workers. They're effectively priced out of the market. A third argument is if we're going to use economic benefit as the arbiter here, it might prove too much. It might prove that we should do away with some of the labor laws that we have. It might mean we have to get rid of minimum wage. maybe get rid of workplace safety regulations. Because the fact is that most of these undocumented workers get paid way less and don't conform to those safety regulations. Argument 4 is moral consistency. We don't enforce every law with maximum rigor. You don't take a jaywalker to jail. You don't impound a car just going 5 miles per hour over the speed limit. So why aggressively enforce these immigration laws? One response is just because we don't enforce a law perfectly doesn't mean we should not enforce it at all. Traffic enforcement is imperfect. That doesn't mean we should get rid of all traffic laws. In other words, this argument is more an argument for consistent enforcement of law, not doing away with law. And the final argument we'll look at is really a slogan: no one is illegal on stolen land. This one is specific to the United States, but it really could go for any country in the Americas. The argument looks like this: the United States got its country through illicit means. Conquest, displacement, sometimes the genocide of indigenous people. But conquest does not create a legitimate title. If I steal your house, I don't become the rightful owner just by living in it long enough. Now, immigration law is an enforcement of territorial sovereignty. So if the territorial claim is illegitimate, because as the slogan says, the land was stolen, then the authority to exclude people is illegitimate too. So let's look at some responses. The first response is that this argument proves too much. If the illegitimacy of a nation's founding voids its laws, then pretty much no nation on earth has legitimate laws. England was conquered by the Romans, the Anglo-Saxons, the Danes, and the Normans. The Aztecs conquered and subjugated the peoples of central Mexico. The Bantu people displaced the earlier inhabitants of sub-Saharan Africa. Japan's Yamamoto people displaced the Ainu. Basically, there's no territory on Earth that hasn't changed hands at some point through violent means. At some point, we're just going to have to throw up our hands and say, even if it started in an unjust way, we've got to be just now. Response 2, this is an argument for indigenous people, but most of the people immigrating into the United States are not indigenous to the United States. Treating them as if they were just erases specific claims to specific territories. Response 3 is that it's strategically self-defeating. If the United States doesn't have legitimate authority to establish its borders, then it has no legitimate authority for any laws. Response 4, the slogan "nobody is illegal on stolen land" seems to be about unjust things that happen to indigenous people. But bringing more people in the United States isn't helping indigenous people. So what's the point of the slogan in the first place? Now let's look at the second view, selective enforcement. This view holds that we should enforce immigration laws, but only on certain undocumented people. Usually the idea is anybody that's broken a law that is not an immigration law, or maybe a more serious law than an immigration law. So, for example, a traffic violation wouldn't constitute a deportation, but a murder would. And I do think it's important to acknowledge that there are two types of undocumented people here. There are gang members, drug dealers, human traffickers, and there are people that contribute to society and are peaceful. I'm not saying that as an argument for or against this position. I'm just saying that we do need to acknowledge the truth of the situation. Not everybody is a murderer, but not everybody is just somebody's abuelita. So, argument 1 for this view, proportionality. Illegal entry is a civil violation, not a felony. Now, we don't send federal agents to go after people that violated a traffic law. So why are we sending them to go after people that violated an immigration law? Proportionality is a basic principle of justice. The punishment should fit the crime. Now, one possible response here is that we should enforce traffic laws a lot more stringently. But another way to respond to this would be that we shouldn't look at one individual case and say, okay, this isn't a big deal. But we should look at the overall effect of mass immigration. Effects on wages, public services, social cohesion, national security. If we say every crossing is no big deal, then we have a lot of crossings. So this response would be kind of a nip it in the bud kind of a response. Argument 2, community safety. This would be something like, we have a limited number of officers. Now, there are a lot bigger crimes happening than illegal immigration. So just send some of the officers after some of the bad guys and save the rest for important things. The trouble with this argument is that it would get rid of a lot of enforcement agencies. To put it in a simple way, imagine you had 10 police officers. There's a murder in the city, and somebody has stolen something from a store that you own. On this view, we should send all 10 police officers after the murderer, and there'd be nobody left to protect your store. Argument 3, cooperation. When undocumented people fear they're going to be deported, they don't talk to the police, they don't contribute to the community, they stay holed up, they basically give us no cooperation whatsoever. Now, selective enforcement would mean they'd still be a little nervous, but they'd be much more willing to cooperate. So if they knew they wouldn't be deported unless they broke a big law, then they would be a lot more prone to cooperate and contribute to society. Now, this argument assumes that the undocumented people would stay in the country in the first place. If they get all deported, then the cooperation problem isn't a problem in the first place, because all the people here are not afraid of being deported because they're here legally. And then argument 4, there have been a lot of people who immigrated illegally that have built a life here. And the government has turned a blind eye to them for a long, long time. Some of them have lived here for decades. Enforcing immigration law on them now wouldn't be fair to them because we basically said, we're going to turn a blind eye to you. We're going to allow you to do whatever you need to. We're going to allow you to build a life. This might be an argument for amnesty as well. One response to this is it basically rewards you for being a good criminal. If you can evade the law for long enough, then we say, okay, you're good, we're going to keep you here. Which is a strange thing because that just means that you've broken the law for longer than most people. Should we then reward you with citizenship? The third position is that we should enforce immigration law across the board. No exceptions. If you're here illegally, you get deported. Or at least we could say if you don't have a legitimate reason like a legitimate asylum claim. Not because your country is poor or undesirable in some way, but there's a legitimate threat on your life. Argument 1 for this is just the rule of law. A law that isn't enforced is not a law at all. It's just a suggestion. You don't get to pick and choose the laws you want to enforce. Of course, a response to this, if we take it literally, it might prove too much. We exercise prosecutorial discretion in every area of law. Not every shoplifter goes to prison. Not every tax cheat gets audited. So full enforcement with zero discretion would be impractical. Argument 2, sovereignty. Every nation has a right to control who comes into its borders, who becomes a member of its political community. The United States is not unusual in doing so. In fact, if you're from the United States and you illegally immigrate to Mexico, they will deport you. So we should enforce immigration laws across the board because of sovereignty. One response is that sovereignty doesn't give a nation a right to do whatever it wants to people within its borders. International law, natural law, and basic morality all constrain what a sovereign nation can do. The question is, does immigration enforcement stay within those constraints? And reasonable people disagree about that. Argument 3, fairness to legal immigrants. It took some people a lot of money and a lot of time to get here. If we don't enforce immigration law, it's just not fair to them. And in fact, rewarding those that broke the rules corrodes the trust of the institutions that those legal immigrants had in the first place. Now, a response here is that the immigration process is brutal. A lot of people come here on visas hoping to become citizens, and it takes so long that the visas run out before they can. So we should reform that system. But while we're waiting, people will argue, what can those people that are trying to get here do? All they can do is try not to get deported. Argument 4, democratic legitimacy. We voted on people who created these immigration laws. Saying that we should just not enforce those laws is basically substituting your own judgment for that of the entire country. A response here might be that sometimes these laws are not chosen because of a democratic process. Sometimes it's because of a bribery or something like that. But then, of course, if that response works, then that would be a problem for any law whatsoever. Any law could be the result of a bribe. And finally, there's the fifth column argument. The term the fifth column comes from the Spanish Civil War. Apparently, some general was besieging Madrid and he said he has 4 columns of soldiers outside of the city and 1 column of soldiers inside the city, meaning just loyal people that were willing to fight for him. Now, there are 2 ways that this argument can go. The first is that there are bad actors out there. There's bad nations that want to conquer the United States. All it would take is for a bunch of them to immigrate, to get into our country and conquer us. The second way the argument could go is that there are a lot of people out there that don't share our values, that would like to change the United States. So if we don't vet who comes in here, then we might get a lot of people that believe in a particular way of living that is at odds with our way of living. So a popular example here would be that some people believe that there should be such a thing as child marriage. It's legal in some places in the world. If enough of those people cross illegally into the United States and vote in child marriage, then something that we find abhorrent would become an actual legal thing. The former version of the argument is a little less plausible than the latter. The United States is pretty big, and a lot of the citizens have a lot of guns. So it would take a lot of people illegally immigrating into the United States for that to happen. The latter version, however, is a lot more plausible, especially for little enclaves in the United States. The more of those enclaves we allow, the more it grows, the more likely we'll lose our values, we'll lose our institutions. Now, it is worth pointing out that this argument was used against the Irish, against the Germans, against the Japanese, and none of those groups of people seem to destroy our values. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that it won't happen for any people group. It could be just the case that those groups of people happen to hold values that were closer to ours. So people that would argue this way would say, if we're not vetting the people that are coming in, then we have no control over the values that are coming in. We may have been lucky in the past, that doesn't mean we'll be lucky in the future. So that is the debate on whether we should enforce immigration laws. Should we support, limit, or abolish ICE? I hope what this video has done is given you at least the ability to see the other side, hopefully to reason through why you believe what you believe. I must say that the debate has become very acrid in the United States. So although I do want to hear what you have to say in the comments, please make sure to be kind. Not just to me, but to anybody who doesn't hold your position. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. I'm hoping to do a few more videos on the important topics of our time. So you'll want to make sure that you're notified when those drop. And that's it. I'll see you around. Adios.